Good evening, everybody. Peace and blessings, and welcome to another episode here with me on Fearless Fridays, where truth turns into transformation. As I mentioned before, I am your host, Asia Nasir, and also founder of Woman of Ascension, which is a life coaching service where we offer assistance to women, in particular, women who are looking to take themselves from where they are to where they want to be. And Fearless Fridays is just another way in which we do that, and just giving you some tidbits along the way to help you to be able to process, to be able to actually, assess, reflect, and then be able to, take on strategies that really take you and help you ascend to the woman that you're striving to be. So tonight we're going to be talking about something really, really triggering. It could be triggering. It's very sensitive. It's a topic that many of us, run away from because it draws up a lot of raw emotions. And so this is a conversation that typically our Fearless Fridays, I try to keep it, less than 15 minutes. But this is one that's probably going to be just a little bit longer because I think there's just some things that we have to talk about, and it can't be missed. You can't skip the steps when you're talking about something so emotional that draws up a lot of emotion. It draws up a lot of raw, triggering feelings, and that is healing past hurt, and that's releasing pain without letting it define you. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So it sounds like in the title of what we're going to be talking about is like, oh, okay, I've heard this before. But when we're really talking about how to do it, the work that's required, the personal development work, that is the very thing that many of us run away from, because it's easier to handle things on the surface level, because I can deal with that without having to really sit in what I'm feeling. So we're going to be actually talking about how to heal past whatever hurt that you're going through. And when I say hurt, I mean hurt. Whether it was betrayal from a friend, whether it was betrayal in a marriage or a relationship that you thought you were developing with someone and it just did not pan out that way. And you're thinking to yourself, you know what, I'm really hurting about this, and I'm finding it really hard to heal from it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to share that we're going to talk about 4 different things this evening. So one of them is actually looking at your behaviors now and how you may be processing your future decisions based off of your past hurt that you have not healed from. And a lot of the decisions that we make, it's like putting on a protective barrier. It's that defensive wall that you feel is actually protecting you, when in actuality, you're not doing anything but staying stuck and finding yourself most likely in another relationship that, you find yourself being betrayed, or feeling that you did not, get what it is that you thought you were going to get from that relationship. And that is because of the decisions that you're making. This is a personal topic for me because I constantly have to tell myself the very things that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight, because I've also been that person and still is that person. Even though I'm a life coach, some of the traumas that I've been through in my life, I constantly have to remind myself and have these conversations with myself in order to try to make better decisions. So let's talk about what those decisions look like, or how past hurt can actually shape our future decisions. And most likely, when you're not dealing with the hurt, the decisions that you're making, that hurt is going to manifest itself, meaning your decisions are not going to be the best way to serve you. So one of the ways that we do that, as I mentioned before, we feel it's a protective shield. So what does that look like, right? A lot of times we choose emotionally unavailable people. Whether it's a friend, whether it's a intimate partner, we will choose unavailable people, emotionally available people. Why? Because it protects us from having to be vulnerable. If this person is not a person who requires deep conversation, deep connection through, conversing with one another and actually, understanding one another, a lot of times you're going to pick an unavailable emotional person because you feel that it protects you from having to be vulnerable. Sometimes what that looks like, or how it processes in our future decisions, is we are overachievers. We're overachievers, right? Because it protects us from feeling like we're not enough in those relationships, whether it was that friendship, whether it was that parent-child relationship, or that intimate partner. In often cases, we'll overextend ourselves in doing things, and feeling like we have to overachieve to compensate for not feeling like we were enough in that relationship, or that person made us feel like we weren't enough in that relationship. Shutting down during conflict. If you're having a difficult conversation, shutting down, that often looks like that's the decision I'm going to make. And a lot of us say that, if it's drama, I ain't participating in it. Difficult conversations is not always about drama. And it's easy to use that as an excuse to not have the difficult conversations, and that's to protect us from feeling abandoned. I'm afraid that person is going to say something that I personally can't deal with. And truth, when someone tells us the truth, right? It doesn't mean, or, a lot of us get in our feelings and we'll say, we don't want to hear what that person has to say. The truth, when someone tells us that, in often cases, it's not a lie. I mean, it doesn't make us feel comfortable, right? So typically when something doesn't make us feel comfortable is because you know that there might be a part of that is true. And what you fear in having that difficult conversation is that there becomes a reality check for that other person to say, hey, look, you know what, maybe this is not a safe space for me. Maybe this is not a healthy friendship for me. And so I want to leave. So you avoid having those difficult conversations in fear of what the outcome is going to be, which is what you fear, which is that person's going to leave me. That person's not going to be my friend anymore, right? So that's the fourth way in which it manifests itself. And this one that I'm going to share is really important. And we often do this, and this is over-explaining ourselves. Over-explaining ourselves because we fear being misunderstood. So a lot of times when if we don't feel like dealing with the hurt, if we don't actually want to process it, a lot of times our future decisions will have these unhealthy habits attached to it because of not dealing with it. It's almost like putting a Band-Aid over a big, huge wound. It's not enough. It's not enough. And so a lot of us feel like, well, I have dealt with it. I've dealt with it. You know what, I'm past it or whatever. And I want to talk about what the difference is from suppressing and it looks like healing versus actually processing the pain that you're in. So I want to share what suppression looks like and what processing pain actually looks like. And then you can determine where you fall in that category. So I want to talk about what suppression looks like. Suppression often looks like, I'm over it. You know what? I'm so over it. I don't even think about it no more. But yet when that person comes up or a topic around what happened to you comes up, you are triggered. I mean, hair trigger, that means it's right here on the surface. And that's because you haven't dealt with it. It's because you have not dealt with it. So when you say you're over it, are you really over it? Because if you're over something, a lot of times that brings on a feeling of acceptance or indifference. It's not taking away anything from you. You remember it and you're like, yeah, it wasn't a good time for me, but it doesn't trigger you anymore. That person doesn't trigger you anymore. The second thing that's often happens when someone is suppressing is that they stay distracted. And this one is a big one. They'll replace it with someone else. So if you have that friend, all of a sudden now you got a BFF. You got a new BFF. You have not known this person long enough. You have not experienced certain things long enough for you to actually say this person is your best friend. But in order to stay distracted from feeling what you're feeling about the loss of that friendship that you thought you had, you distract yourself with someone else. And then you start, acting as if though this person is your best friend. So that way you don't have to deal with it. Or even in an intimate relationship, you'll find a lot of people will just jump into another relationship with someone because it keeps them distracted from actually having to deal with whatever the emotions are coming from that past relationship. And that's a huge one because you're just jumping from one person to the other. And if you're bringing on some of those things that I was mentioning before, those poor decisions as a result of not dealing with it, more than likely there's going to be a break in that friendship or a break in that intimate relationship. Okay. This next one is something that I struggle with, and I've curbed it a lot, but I still have a ways to go. And that's overworking. A lot of us get, especially as women, we get right into work. You know what? I'm focusing on my goals, I'm focusing on this, and then that becomes your whole world. And you feel because you're being productive at work, that means your life in general, your personal life and everything else is healed. And that's not true. Again, they have a statement. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but they say things grow where it's watered, right? Your grass grows where it's watered. Well, it's the same thing. If you're watering your professional goals, right? That's what's going to be, that's what's going to grow, that's what's going to develop, that's what's going to increase. However, if you are starving your personal feelings, your pain, it's going to just get deeper and deeper. And although it's suppressed, doesn't mean that it's gone, right? Doesn't mean that it's gone. Another one is, as I mentioned before, avoiding those hard conversations. That's suppressing something. If someone brings up a topic that you feel triggered in, and that person really needs to have this conversation with you, and you just shut it down, that means you are suppressing. Because when you have processed something, you can have a conversation, even if it is uncomfortable. You can have a conversation because it's not about the conversation. It's about how you're choosing to respond to the conversation. And a healed person can respond appropriately to any conversation. Okay. Last but not least is numbing. A lot of us numb ourselves in our feelings. So that could be, overeating. And we find that, some people say, I eat food, it's comfort food. It makes me feel better. So it numbs you to what's happening because now you're eating, or you're indulging in social media, you're scrolling for hours, and now you are part of everyone else's life on social media versus, dealing with your own emotions. And last but not least is, you numb yourself to relationships. You don't have any feelings. All of a sudden you were a person who was affectionate. You was a person who needed, connection and intimacy. And now in those relationships, you have numbed yourself to that. And so you can have a lot of these surface relationships. And one thing I'll say is, when you are having a relationship that God is pleased with, God doesn't deal in surface relationships. He talks about marriage. Whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, whether you're Catholic, God talks about marriage. So he's not into play conversations, play relationships, or surface relationships. So if you are indulging in those type of relationships, is because you are numbing yourself to actually dealing with having a connected, intimate relationship. So now I want to switch that to, we talked about what it looks like to have, suppressing your pain. I want you to know that it's okay to feel that. That's typically the first phase of grief or pain, is suppressing, it's denying. But now I want to turn it into processing. How do we process pain? Because pain is difficult. Pain is not something that we volunteer for. Yeah, I'm a glutton for pain. Most of us are not like that, right? So when you're dealing, I want you to shift now to see what it actually looks like. So that was not to shame anyone. I want to be clear. That's not to shame anyone and saying, hey, this is where you're at. You are suppressing. You're not, you're really not healed. It's a place of awareness. It's a place of clarity. And when you're dealing in clarity, which is how God works, you will see that your life deals differently, because now those decisions are based off of having informed decisions versus just reacting off of impulse. So now shifting into processing pain, the first thing is naming it without minimizing it. Oh, yeah, that happened to me, but it wasn't even a big deal. I was able to get, no. If it really hurts you, naming that pain and not minimizing it. Oh, that happened such a long time ago. Pain does not have, especially if it hasn't been dealt with, it does not have an expiration date. So actually owning whatever it is without having to minimize it, right? Feeling the emotion without judging yourself. That's really important. A lot of times when we identify a feeling or an emotion, we feel like it's a form of weakness. And so we don't want to attach that to ourselves. We're strong. I'm a strong woman. I can deal with that. I've been past things. A lot of times we'll do that. And, we want to make sure that when we're feeling that emotion, we want to feel the emotion without having to judge ourselves with it. Yep, that moment doesn't make me feel strong, but it is a real feeling that I'm having in the moment. I'm having a moment, right? Having a feeling about it. Allowing yourself to grieve. Allowing yourself to grieve. If it's a loss of a friend that you thought was your friend, why is that a shameful thing to cry about it? A friend is somebody that, you go through life with. You share the best of life, you share the worst of life, you share all of the in-betweens. That person is that support system. That person is your vacation, buddy. They do everything with you, right? It's that friend that shares every aspect of your life. So if you lose someone like that for any reason, whether it's death, whether it's a break in the friendship or something like that, why would you not feel like you can grieve for that? Processing your pain is actually grieving, feeling it, accepting that this hurts. If there was a relationship, a marriage that is no longer here, no longer intact, grieving it. A lot comes with marriage. There's a lot of dreams that you have to let go of, right? A lot of hopes and all of these things that you aspire to do together. Now that's no longer to be. If someone passed away and you were married to this person, like, you have to grieve all that you were striving to be, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. That is actually processing it. And grief is not just for a moment. It could be 2 years from now and you're like, I'm still grieving that person because that person had such an impact in your life. So grieving is something that you have to embrace. That there will be moments where you think, oh my God, I was doing so good for 6 months and now I heard a song, or I saw something on TV and it brought back memories, and I feel like it just happened. That is part of grief. That is part of grief. Secondly is owning your part without taking blame for what wasn't yours. So what I mean by that is, when you look at any relationship, if there's a break in the relationship, you can always look at yourself, because all of us, none of us are perfect. We can always look back and self-reflect, self-assess, and say, you know what? Yeah, I could have done that better. Or maybe I was bringing something into the relationship that did not serve the relationship well. And I take ownership for that. But take ownership for that and not take that was the split. If that other person was bringing negativity or something negative to the relationship, let that person keep theirs. Don't take on someone else's guilt or mistakes. You own yours, and that's the balance. You take ownership for yours, you assess it, reflect, and then you learn from it. You learn, how do I do this different, right? A lot of times we stay in something, and I like to use acronyms a lot, because in memorization it helps us to, when you identify something or attach it to something, it allows you to be able to remember it better. So a lot of times we stay in pain, suppressed pain, unhealed pain. We'll stay in that and we're very comfortable with that. So I'm going to use the acronyms of the word stay in a form of healing, though. So the S for stay stands for sit with your emotions. Sit with them. And I used to have a mentor that I used to listen to. I still listen to him. And he often says, you have to sit in your discomfort. That's his favorite line. Sit in your discomfort. And how true that is, right? When you are dealing with pain, you have to sit in that emotion of everything that it brought. So if it brought nostalgia, if it brought laughs, if it brought tears, if it brought pain, if it brought, betrayal, you have to sit in that, because you can't cope with something, you can't deal with something, and you can't process something that you have not fully addressed and acknowledged. So you got to sit in that. The T stands for tell the truth. Tell the truth of how it made you feel, what it did to you. Don't minimize it. Don't make it into something that it wasn't. Don't embellish. Just tell the truth for what it was. If you miss that friendship, say, I missed the friendship that I thought I had, and then to go above and beyond that, the A stands for accept how it impacted you. I developed depression. I no longer trust people. I have a hard time, trusting myself, and my decisions. Accept how that break and that pain or whatever that was, how it affected you. You have to accept how it impacted you, because if you can't make the cause and effect, then you can't deal with, okay, I want to respond better. This is how I'm currently responding now because of how it impacted me, and it's not healthy, but I want to do it better. Now you know where you're coming from in order to learn how to respond in a healthy way. And the why in stay is yielding the timeline. Yielding the timeline. And the reason why I say yielding the timeline, a lot of times we put a time frame, or we put our timeline for grief on a calendar. Okay, this is January, by such and such day, I want to, I'm going to be over this. Healing doesn't work on a calendar. Healing works on how much effort you put into something. And even when you put in effort, doesn't mean that your feelings are still not hurt from time to time, or that you don't, think about that person, but you're able to respond better to the trigger. You're able to respond better to possibly bumping into that person, and you're not having a total meltdown. That's healing. Healing doesn't mean you're void of feelings. Healing just means you've learned how to process dealing with those feelings in a healthy way. Okay. So I want to give you 2 strategies now on how to release pain without letting it define you. So the first one is to separate the event from your identity. A lot of times we internalize pain, or an incident that happened will make that our identity. So we'll say things like, this happened to me, so this means I am. Or this betrayal happened to me, which means I'm not good enough, or I'm unworthy. Somehow we internalize what someone else's actions were and make them, who we are. Let it define us. You got to release that. You have to. And I know it's easier said than done, but it has to happen. And our brain believes whatever it tells it, right or wrong. It's going to believe it. So if you tell yourself that that situation happened and that's because of you, you're going to walk into every relationship feeling like you have to over explain, overreach, do more, or shut down, because you want to avoid the vulnerability, to feel like you're not misunderstood, all of the things that we talked about in the beginning. You have to let go of that, because that's automatically, you're training your brain that if this happens, this is how I have to respond to it. Right? So you have to release yourself, or detach yourself as what of an event that happened, not having to have anything to do with your identity. So instead of saying, because this happened, that means I am, what you can say is, yeah, this happened to me, but it doesn't define me. Yeah, that hurt me, but that's not who I am. Yeah, that hurt me, and that may not have been my finest moment, but that is not who I am. Right? Stop attaching yourself to pain. Stop attaching yourself to the event that hurt you or that caused you pain. It does not mean that's a moment. That's a moment in your life. That's an event that's happening in your life. And when we're talking about an event is not your pattern. It's not your everyday thing. So if it's not an everyday thing, why are you attaching it to your everyday identity? Right? Why are you attaching it to that? So that's one way that you can do that. And you can, this is what I love. You can honor your pain without attaching your personality to it. You can honor your pain. You most definitely, and you should. But it does not mean that you have to attach your whole identity and your personality to it. It is an event. It's something that happened, and that event is over. And now I'm looking to really move on. And in moving on, I stay intact. I don't become jaded. I don't become, bitter. I become better for it when you do the work, right? So last strategy that I want to share is what healing actually looks like. So we talked about processing it and what it looks like, the feelings but healing, when you actually can see what it actually looks like, and you say, oh, I'm there. I'm at that acceptance point. I'm at that releasing point. What does that actually look like? And I want to talk about healing and not the Instagram version of it, because we got people on here that are broken, depressed, broke down, beat up from the feet up, right? And yet we're sitting up here, got the best glamour photos on here, looking like we got it all together. That's the Instagram version of it. I'm not talking about that type of healing where, depending on how many likes, it makes you feel good about yourself and about your life. No, it's about the real work, right? What healing actually looks like is crying while still going to work. Still, like, I had that cry, but I'm going to go out today with my friends. I had that cry last night, but I got up this morning and I'm going to work. I'm still dealing with that grief. I'm not suppressing it. I'm not trying to act like it's not there, but I know I still have responsibilities. And so I'm going to still have to do what I have to do. I do have to literally move on, but that does not mean that I'm void of how it's making me feel in the moment. And I'm processing that. I am allowing myself to grieve. That is what healing looks like. Setting boundaries. This one is going to sound funny because we usually hear the opposite, but healing actually sounds like or looks like setting boundaries and feeling guilty. Actually feeling it. We usually hear setting boundaries and not feeling guilty of it. That's when that's yes, but when you've dealt with pain and when you are dealing with something that's hurt you, sometimes in that healing process, you are going to set a boundary and you're going to feel real guilty about it. You're going to feel guilty that you're saying that to that person because you know that person's not comfortable with it and you feel uncomfortable making them feel uncomfortable. That is part of healing because in spite of the fact that you feel guilty, you set that boundary anyway. That's healing. Knowing that it makes you feel bad, but knowing that that's the healthy thing to do, so you did it anyway. That's what healing looks like. Missing someone, knowing that you can never go back to that friendship. Missing someone, knowing that you can never go back to that marriage. Missing someone, knowing that that person is never coming back. That's a real feeling. That's a real emotion that you're having. Like, I miss that person. I miss them. I know they weren't good for me, but it's like that saying, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There was some good times that you had with that person. So you can own that. Or if you're dealing with someone who's a manipulator and you fell in love with who they represented themselves to be, although they were not true in what they represented, you were true in your response to who you thought they were. That was a real person that you thought you fell in love with, right? Because you thought that's what it was. Why would you not miss someone or miss something that, someone that made you feel good in their presence? Like, we had great times, we laughed and all this stuff. It's okay to miss that, but acknowledging, as I mentioned before, missing someone, knowing you can't go back to that because you acknowledge that what I may have fell in love with or that friendship that I thought we had really doesn't exist in that person. Is really not who that person is. And so you understand that you miss what you thought it was, but understanding enough that you're not going to go back to it because you have a moment of nostalgia or you're missing that person. You don't pick up that phone or text that person. I can never go back. This is another one. And a lot of manipulators will make you feel the opposite. It's forgiving without reconciling. A lot of people make you feel they'll use this against you because if they know you're an empath or that you're a giving person or even a spiritual person, they'll even use surahs in the Quran. They'll use scriptures in the Bible. They'll use different, spiritual attack on you to make you feel like, you have to forgive. And yes, forgiving is for you. And forgiveness is definitely what we all strive to have from God. There's no doubt about it. We forgive because first we want to be forgiven. And also that's part of healing. It's forgiving that person, not because of something you did, but it's forgiving that person, understanding that in forgiving, you are releasing, you are understanding that I forgive you in spite of who you are and in spite of what you did to me, because my life is worthy of what's ahead. And I need to release this in order to embrace all the good that's to come. That's for you, right? So forgiving is important, but that does not mean that you have to reconcile. And a lot of manipulators, a lot of narcissistic people, a lot of selfish people will make you feel like in forgiving them means continued access of you. That's a lie. And the devil is a liar. That's a lie. Forgiving someone does not mean you have to reconcile that friendship, that marriage, that relationship. You do not have to reconcile that. That is not what forgiveness means. It's actually being smart. And in my faith, it teaches a believer doesn't get stung in the same hole twice, meaning I learned my lesson from that. First time, shame on you. Second time, shame on me, right? So forgiving someone is letting go. It is letting go. It's letting go of all the baggage that came with, the hurt that it came with, to release you. And also understanding that forgiving that person allows you then to put yourself in a position where God can forgive you for your shortcomings, right? You don't feel guilty in asking God for that. So Seisha, I see you here. Thank you so much. So that's not what forgiveness means. And that's really important, because a lot of us get sucked back into a painful situation because we're manipulated in thinking that forgiving someone means we have to have that person within our circle. That's not what that means. You can even, it could be a family member. You can love that person from afar. I love this person. I'll continue to pray for you, but you can't be at my table, because that you sitting at my table continues to leave me starving. That's not what forgiveness means. And God wants us, when we say we love our creator, that means we love ourselves, because he loves us. He wants what's good for us. That's why when he tells us what's right and wrong and to stay away from this and to not indulge, but to do more of this, is to better us, is to make us better. He wants good for us. So when you are choosing to self-preserve, which is staying away from something toxic or something that is not beneficial to you, that is loving yourself, right? And that's what every woman should want. Especially as women, as mothers, we want to be able to not just teach it to our children, but also be the example of what self-love looks like. And last but not least, let me just say this. Healing also looks like relapsing into old habits. But the most important thing is catching yourself and getting back on track. That's what healing looks like. That's what healing looks like. A lot of times we feel like, healing is just this, when everything looks good and everything looks pretty and we got everything all together. That's a myth. That is a lie. And any therapist or any life coach that tells you that is someone that's just blowing smoke, where, because it's just not true. Personal development, healing is messy. Let's be clear. It's messy. It's layered, right? And you can have those moments of, when it's layered or when it's messy, where you can actually respond in a messy way. It is not linear. Your ascension. That's why I started my business called Woman of Ascension. We're ascending somewhere, and ascending is not linear. That doesn't mean your healing process is just going to look like this. Let me tell you something. Healing looks like this, looks like this, looks like this, looks like this. It has all kind of ups, downs, turns, which way, that way. It has all of it. But the most important part is that you're able to catch yourself and say, wait, hold on. I'm reverting back to ways that are not serving me, and it's not pleasing to my Lord. It's not pleasing. So there's not going to be any benefit in me continuing in this path. This is how I got in this situation, and I want to get out of it. I want to actually heal from this. But I want you to understand, ladies, that if you fall, where you relapse into it, that does not mean that you are not healing. You're in the thick of it is what it means. And when you're in the thick of it, you're going to have the ups and downs. It's going to be like a roller coaster. It's not linear, but eventually it will coast if you put in the work. So there's a couple of questions that I want you to ask yourself in your healing, and I actually wrote it down. Okay. I want you to ask yourself, and this is part of your healing. So that way you know what it looks like. So that way, as you get closer to it, you can identify that your healing is actually in motion. The first one is, who would I be? Who would I be if this pain was no longer running my decisions? Who would you be if this pain that you've been suppressing, that you have been, camouflaging, right? That you've put a Band-Aid over, who would you be? Who would you actually be if you could just rid yourself, cut it out of your life, and just be free of it? Who would you be if this was no longer running your decisions? And then the second question is, what could change if you believe that you was worthy of peace? Who would you be? Who would you be if you actually can envision your life of being someone who's worthy of peace? Because when you feel that your life is worthy of peace on all levels, spiritual, professional, personal, you feel like you are worthy of peace and drama free, yet you make different decisions, all right. Certain people that you choose to have around you, that changes. Those decision changes because you feel you deserve it. Not something that just dropped on your lap because it's attached to someone else, but no, your life and the decisions and the boundaries and the standards that you set for yourself dictate this level of peace. That's what I want you to ask yourself. And ladies, please remember that healing is not absent of triggers. You're going to be triggered. But the most important thing is how you respond differently to those triggers. And when you are healed, you will see the difference. You're not, behaving in a way that you have to look back at and say, you know what, I still got work to do. Sometimes it's going to take months. Sometimes it takes years. And for some things, depending on how deep it is going to be a journey of healing for the rest of your life. It is. Some wounds are just that deep. But in your healing means that you respond to it better and better each time. With some relapses maybe along the way in the beginning, but as you get closer to being a better person and assessing and being able to respond, you're going to see that those relapses become less and less, and that's okay. So that's what I wanted to share with you today on our Fearless Friday. If you are interested in life coaching, I am a certified life coach. I have short-term programs as well as long-term. So if you're looking for something more long-term, and I do want to give this disclaimer, I am not a therapist. So when it comes to certain mental health issues, those are things that I am not qualified to coach you in, but I can, share resources of places and people that can assist you in that. But if you are just, in a space where you feel stuck and you're just like, I really just need some strategy and I need someone to hold me accountable, that's what I'm here for. So I do have my website that I can post up here that I will put up, and you'll see that in just a moment. womanofascension.com. You can definitely look on my website and you'll be able to see the different programs that I offer. Thank you so much, Seisha, for tuning in and listening to these gems that we had to share today on Fearless Friday. But yeah, if you're looking for any coaching short term, as short as 4 weeks and as long as a year, you can reach out to me and then we can have a clarity intake. So that way I can see how I can assist you and look at where you are versus where you're trying to ascend to be. So that way you can be held accountable and have a support system that really is there to serve you. So stay tuned for our next Fearless Friday, which will be in a couple of weeks, where I'll be sharing some additional information that I hope will truly benefit you in helping you to be able to transform and ascend to the woman that you were always intended to be. So I'll see you at the next, God willing, see you at the next Fearless Friday.